You're about to listen to a podcast full of wonder, excitement, and discovery. It's time for an adventure through Odyssey. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Adventures Through Odyssey podcast, Odyssey Revisited. I'm Will here with John, and it's time for our June news roundup. We didn't really have a lot happen, so we'll probably read another AI script for fun, but we did have some cool notes on the official Adventures in Odyssey podcast because they did a Q&A episode. So
Yes, what did they say?
we will read over these. Okay. So it was a lot of questions about little things. So like Buckle Up is named for Jules and Buck. No big surprise there. I know. Now so the first big thing was Jules and Buck dating plays heavily into album 75, which says to me there was probably going to be a Jules and Buck two-parter originally, but then they kind of merged it with the Eugene episode.
Yeah, probably, right? I mean, it's interesting, right? Because they just got them together, and presumably some of it's like, Christian dating, which isn't bad. They haven't touched that much on like young people Christian dating
Absolutely.
before, like a little bit with Connie here and there, but nothing too much. But it is interesting now, right? Because are they gonna write Buck off the show with Eugene? Yeah. And so it kind of raises these questions of like, what is their relationship going to be?
I just hope it's not like 3 parts of that, then in the last part we get to the Eugene stuff.
I don't think, is it a 3-part or 4-part episode?
4-part.
Yeah, I mean, I think it probably was a 2-parter they got. So I mean, I think it will take up a third, let's say, of the time of the episode.
Yeah. So they were talking. So someone asked, like, did you plan Morian Susu's character from the start? And Marshall Younger was very clear that he did not. So that kind of makes a little sense. I don't know. The resolution to the original arc feels a little not in line with a lot of the stuff going on.
Yeah, I mean, they just knew he was going to be some kind of conniving character.
Yes. Now, the two big things from this is they said, but Jillian was planned from the start, which I don't believe.
Well, I think Jillian, in the sense where they probably called her and were like, we have some stuff planned. Will you be a part of it?
Well, that's possible.
I think it's in the sense where they asked, for this little arc, can you come back? And she was like, yeah, sure.
Right.
That would have to be my guess regarding Jillian. But I do think, I believe that could be happen. Yeah, I think if you don't know what was going on with Mori and Zuzu, yeah. I don't. So you wouldn't necessarily know for sure what Jillian's role is exactly gonna be.
Right, and then they also mentioned a Mori and Susu 3-parter for album 76.
I mean, they kind of need it. I mean, I feel like Wit adopted them. Not adopted them. It's like a weird thing, right? Like Wit's just is just like watching them. I shouldn't say adopted them, but yeah, it's weird, right? Like I feel like we need more about that because that's like a pretty big thing that they're living with Wit. We really haven't heard anything. And I get like stuff's come up. I think maybe that would have happened this album, but I'm sure a lot got switched because of Will Ryan dying.
Yes, I was about to say. And so is this about them and Wit, or is this like a continuation of whoever this kid is they're trying to hunt down?
It has to be probably both, right?
Yeah, I would assume so. Maybe they're going to walk back a little bit, the whole, well, you kids are special, and that's why I didn't step in part of the story.
Yeah, that was interesting. I mean, Wit, you kind of gotta sometimes, like, because I think we'll get to it a little bit in this episode, but it's like Wit prior, and even now, has been written with a lot of, like, foresight. Yes. Like, in the sense where, like, Wit is very much on top, kind of knowing, like, this is good, this is bad, this could be problematic. And so when you have these things where he's like, you want to make Wit seem competent. So it's like, it's like a kind of weird thing. I don't think they're going to really address that ever. I mean, maybe they will. But I just think they're probably a little bit like, well, we just had to have a reason for Wit acting the way he did. That wasn't just negligent.
I do kind of agree.
Yeah. I don't hate it. Like, it's fine if that's the reasoning, but I don't think we're going to necessarily get any big payoff with that. If we do, and it works, that's great, but I'm just not, like, expecting, like, oh, really? That's what you meant, Wit, you know?
Yeah, exactly. So the other big thing is about Ryan. So, the boy Jules took to the prom. Ryan will return in an episode called Alibis, which is coming to the club later this year.
He'd be a good club character.
Well, and remember, he was the mayor of Kidsborough.
Oh, is it the same voice actor?
Yes, they confirmed that.
Oh, but was Ryan wasn't Ryan in the first few albums after the reboot?
Yes.
Okay, so they're just bringing him back. So any perception that time has passed is just
Yeah.
not
Now,
there.
and they said Kidsborough will be returning in the comics. Yes, because someone asked, is Kidsborough ever coming back? And they said no, because they asked if Ryan's still technically the mayor. And that would be an interesting thing for him to pull at some point. Like, I was the mayor of Kidsborough, so while we're standing here, anything I say goes.
I'll say this, that's a great comic idea as Kidsborough.
Yes.
What it should be is some kid like finding the ruins of Kidsborough and some investigation of why it collapsed, and it's some conspiracy.
Oh, that's a good one.
That would be a fun comic where it's like, I get why that's not its own episode, because it's so reliant on you caring about Kidsborough.
Yes. Now, I think the episode could be about something else based on this month's free comic, but we'll get back to that. So that was all they really talked about. That was a note. Everything else was about Connie being left-handed and stuff.
Yeah.
So we're not going to cover every single question, but
Fair.
All right. So we have a lot of comic stuff to cover this month, kind of, between the new bite-sized adventure this month's free comic and the Nicholas story. So
I have read the Nicholas story. I will say that.
Yes, we are recording this Monday, June 5th, so we have read up till that one.
Yeah. So let's start with that. I guess.
So I know
exposition.
Yes, I was about to say this has basically been the exposition dump month. Not in a bad way, but it's notable we randomly cut away to Jason climbing the TV tower to give the story some tension.
Yeah. I personally feel, I mean, again, I still like the story. I thought these were good comics. I do feel like this is where it's like having more time in like an episode to like develop some of this stuff would have been interesting.
Yes, well, I did notice. So this last comic was number 48 of all of them. I wonder if they're going to go to 50. So we're just kind of trying to ride the wave until we get there. Because the first part was number 25, so, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. I feel like, right, it's like an interesting thing they bring up where Wit's like, I should have done this. I should have thought about that. And that's like an interesting take, right? Because, like,
yes.
I mean, we've brought up Nicholas before, like, what happened to Nicholas? But, like, it is, like, an interesting take, like, why didn't more people help him? And I guess that could be an interesting episode, right? Like, because, I mean, the comics definitely have morals, and it's going to be interesting to see what the moral is as it goes along.
Yes.
But I think it's also really interesting, given that Wit's, like, watching the two kids, Maury and Suzu.
I do fully agree. So, and as far as like the final reveal of how Nicholas became the way he was in that episode, that part makes sense. Like based on his character, you totally believe he went back to the orphanage, was super bitter about it, and went crazy because he knew he knew what happened at Campbell County College. So the part about Blackguard adopting him is the one piece of continuity these comics have added that I feel was a little silly.
I mean, right, like, I think it's a bit much. I don't think it's awful. I think you could have done it a different way. Like, I don't know if you necessarily needed the adoption thing, but that's why it's interesting, right? Because Wit's like, I should have become your father.
Yes.
Although, I'll go back and say this. It actually does totally explain why he'd be totally different if that program got shut down and he was in middle school and he was stuck in high school / middle school now.
Yes, absolutely.
That's actually like, okay, that makes sense. He's bitter about that after everything that happened. Um,
Right.
like that works quite well in my opinion. Keep going. I had something I wanted to say, but you say your thing first.
Oh, no. So I was basically wrapping it up. I think, honestly, we've jokingly referred to whoever Mori Susu, Emily, and Cooper are hunting down as Odyssey's Joker. Nicholas could almost be considered Odyssey's Thanos because, in a weird way, he does have a point, but you also kind of understand why Wit wants to stop him.
Well, yeah, it's weird, right? Because he's like, well, I can transfer this money for good charities. And then Wit's like, who's to decide what's a good charity? You?
Exactly. Well,
I'm like, that's not quite what he says. But it's like, I'm like, I don't know if you needed that weird complexity. Like, if that's going to be your point. But it's kind of weird when they kind of side glance the fact that, like, um, what's his name? Richard Maxwell was essentially doing terrorist attacks.
yes, that is true. And like maybe the end of the comic will either have him turn himself in or do penance or something. But you are right. It is a little bit of a 1-2 punch of, oh, Nicholas can't decide what charities to fund, but Richard Maxwell can blow up
Yeah,
organizations.
yeah. And so it is like, I wonder if this was an episode or at the end it's going to be like, what is the cost of doing wrong things for good? Like
Yeah.
justified. Like, that's interesting. And if they go more into that in the next few issues, I think, oh, that in the next few strips that works. But kind of just as like an offhand thing at this point, it's a little weird
Yes.
because we also don't know if that is that all Nicholas is doing, because I'm getting a sense he's doing a lot of bad things on top of the good things, but
Well,
it's never really made clear because they just say that one line. It's like, I can give to more charities. And it's like, to be honest, it's like they're drawing on that Connie episode where it's like she's like berating people to try to give money.
yes.
And it's like I don't like, it's the whole like dirty money argument, which is a little, or like, what is it, sin money is the term they
Yes.
said. Which isn't like, okay, like I didn't like how they did in that episode. This is a better example of probably what could be deemed sin money. um but it just, if those are the two morals, like the whole Wit like should have done this for him, even though like he wasn't really under any obligation to, and you could say that
Right.
about a lot of kids. And the whole money, like, oh, like, rights, wrongs, and reasons sort of thing. It's like, I could very much like them, just right now, if nothing more is done with them, it's a little weird.
Yeah, so I am starting to worry they're going to turn like why didn't we adopt this kid into a running plot line.
Well, the thing with Mori and Suzu is, I looked up her name. Sorry if I've mispronounced it at other times this episode. Um it would have been interesting to tie that in a little bit, to be like, you took them in. I mean, it's like a lot of like systematic failures. I mean, there's like government failure in there to have him like in a right program. There's university failure there. There's individual failure, you
Right.
know.
Yes, I agree. I'm just saying, although I liked where the comic went, it did kind of turn into, well, Wick could have also said that to so many kids just because Nicholas got a little megalomaniacal.
I hope it somehow ends, because I think this, like, that Richard Maxwell somehow saves or helps Nicholas in a good way, because it still feels a little bit like a lot of these issues stem from the fact that Richard Maxwell did bad things to Nicholas.
Yes.
Like, that was the impetus of all this, which makes it like a really good way to bring Richard Maxwell back.
Right. Because, John, you saying that made me realize in the episode where Richard comes back to Odyssey to apologize to everybody, they never bring up Nicholas.
Yeah, and so it would be really, I think, strong in the comic if they did that. Because right now it's like weird because Richard Maxwell still's kind of being like, Nikki.
Yeah, that's true.
And it's like, I feel like you gotta turn it a little bit.
Yes.
But
You
I'm
still
still
got.
enjoying the comic. Just, I'm
Yes.
curious. It's like a few things that made me like, how are you gonna wrap this up?
Yeah, and I think especially, again, we had like a month of action followed by a month of exposition, so it kind of feels like, you know, where is this all? Anyway, Jason's still stuck on the TV tower, which I have to imagine is a visual reference to Novacom.
Yeah.
So, all right, so John did not read the free comic.
Sorry.
Shame. So this one's a little different. It's Eugene and some girl who I don't think has been in the show before in the Bible room, and Eugene's explaining Noah's Ark to her. And she mentions, so by that logic, my stuffed unicorn should be on. It's like that 5-year-old logic of this is all happening right now thing.
Yeah.
So Eugene, well, you see, it was 2 animals, so there would need to be a Mr. Fluffy Unicorn or whatever the unicorn was called. And she has Mr. Fluffy Unicorn in the backpack. So he puts the unicorns on the Ark. Then Wit comes downstairs and says, Eugene, why are there unicorns, dragons, and Zapazoids action figures on the Ark? And Eugene said, due to circumstances apparently beyond my control, reality has been temporarily suspended.
That's pretty funny. That's a good bit.
Yeah. So then at the bottom it says, read more about the Ark on June 6th in the new Imagination Station book. And the cover is the Ark, but there are 2 kids riding a woolly mammoth and there's like an ogre behind them or something. So it seems to be a book that's kind of saying there might have been unicorns, but they were washed away in the flood.
I feel like I have to read this book.
I know. It's either a book or an audiobook.
I know a long time ago I bought the Kidsborough books, being like, oh, we can read these. But that seems so interesting, right? Like, is it going to be... Like, because there are a lot of interesting ways you could do the Ark. Do I think Odyssey is going to, like, do that? I don't what is Odyssey going to say? Like, here's a... Like, are they going to say there's many different ways the Ark could have happened? Or are they going to say, like, well, there could have been dinosaurs around at the Ark times?
Yeah, exactly. I can't wait for Wit's friend Ken Ham to show up.
The woolly mammoth, at least, like, there's evidence that woolly mammoths existed.
Yes, exactly.
So College has a woolly mammoth in its science department.
This is true. Yeah, so this is my one word. So I'm starting to wonder if they're going to use these comics to plug new book releases, and that's why I wonder if Kidsbro might come back for a free monthly comic to say the new Kidsbro adventures are available soon.
That's not the worst idea. I mean, it seems like a lot of these comics are based upon what the writers want it to be.
Yeah.
Writers. I don't know how many people are writing it.
I have no idea. This is the first comic, though, that, like, plugs something directly outside of the show itself.
Yeah, but it seems pretty funny.
It's not a bad thing. That was a cute comic, and now that we're plugging a book where we might be saying unicorns existed?
Yeah.
And, I know John has also not been reading the bite-sized adventure on Instagram, so I'm just going to fill him in.
It's not on Instagram anymore.
Yes, it is.
No, I'm not on Instagram anymore.
Okay, so I feel like between this and the Acolyte comic, they want to do longer stories, so, just so they can have more excitement. So this one is, Renee is in a Room of Consequence adventure about what if Bart Rathbone was elected mayor? So it starts off with, some reviews where Bernard and Tom are super mad about it, but Wit's trying to give him a chance. So Bart's first act as mayor is everyone's going to go to the Electric Palace and buy lights to decorate their house so we can have a giant Odyssey light display. He turns on the light display and blows out power to the town for a week. So the governor of whatever state they live in grants him absolute power or something, so he dissolves the city council, and before he can restore power to the town, he's in the process of making some changes. So, because when this first happened, when we got to the whole light blowing out the town thing, I thought, oh, this is a joke. They don't want to do anything that serious. And we're going to move on to the next story. Then it kept going.
So here's my question. Is this like, oh, what if he had been elected at a certain point? Or is this like is this when he was under this is Blackguard, or is this separate from Blackguard?
This would have been, what if the episode where Bart ran for mayor ended with him becoming mayor?
But was he connected to Blackguard at that time?
I need to double check. Yeah, I think so. Blackguard might not have reached out to him at that point, but we will see. Because that episode, Tom for mayor does in fact end with
the Richard Maxwell calling, not Richard
Maxwell. Right, Glossman calling Blackguard.
Yeah. I guess that makes me a little concerned. I mean, if it had been the post one where it's like Tom drops out and I don't think Bart runs.
Right. I have to double check because like Margaret Faye's also mentioned, so it might just be in and Jared's around, so it might actually be in a different time window.
Okay. Because it's like because it totally makes sense he would try to dissolve the city council then.
Yeah.
But it's weird, right? Without anything else.
Yeah, so I'm actually kind of enjoying this. You know, they release one panel a day, which at a point starts to kind of feel like, again, this might have made a good Elsewhere and Odyssey comic series.
Yeah.
So that's that. All right, so just for a little fun, since we didn't have a lot of news, I'll read another AI generated script.
Well,
Okay, so
we've already been going 20 minutes. We still have to talk about our episode.
I know, but the one it spit out for me this month was so good I have to read it.
Okay.
So I just decided for fun to see what the AI generator would do, because the Connie gets married one was kind of boring. It was just Connie gets married to Jeff Lewis, and Wit reflects on Connie's life. So I wrote just in the phrase, write an Adventures in Odyssey crossover, to see what it crossed over with. Buckle up. It was an ordinary day in Odyssey with kids playing, families walking, and ice cream trucks passing by. But suddenly, something strange happened. A large glowing portal appeared in the middle of the town square, and out of it came Bob the Tomato and Larry the Cucumber from VeggieTales. Which, I mean, let's be fair, if Odyssey were to actually...
I feel like you are coming up with these pitches.
I am not. Do you want me to send it to you?
Like the record of the AI?
Yes.
Sure.
Okay. But, I mean, let's be fair here. If Odyssey were to, like, cross over with something outside of Focus on the Family, I don't know how they do it. Maybe Wit hits his head or something, but...
Right. I don't think Odyssey would be, like, talking vegetables.
Well, the Duggars were the same way.
Oh, yeah, I heard about that.
So, no, we have not watched the documentary yet. We're not going to talk about it.
No, but I saw that news story.
Yes. Everyone was surprised to see them, but before they could ask any questions, Bob and Larry explained they were on a mission from God to spread his message of loving kindness across different worlds and dimensions. They had already visited several other places, and now they were in Odyssey to seek help from the town's heroes, the Adventures in Odyssey gang. You can tell an AI wrote this. Wit, Connie, Eugene, and the rest of the crew were more than happy to help. They welcomed Bob and Larry with open arms and listened intently to their mission. They soon learned that there was a powerful villain called the Darkness, who was trying to spread hate and fear across the universe. The Darkness had already conquered several worlds, and now he was setting his sights on Earth. The Odyssey team and Bob and Larry knew they had to act fast. Together they set out on a journey to stop the Darkness and spread God's message of loving kindness across the universe. They encountered many challenges along the way, including hostile aliens, treacherous planets, and even the Darkness himself. But through their faith, courage, and teamwork, they persevered. They spread kindness and love wherever they went, and slowly but surely began to defeat the Darkness's power. With the help of God, they ultimately succeeded in saving the universe from his grasp. As they returned home to Odyssey, everyone was tired but happy. They had made new friends, learned important lessons, and saved the universe from a terrible fate. Bob and Larry bid farewell, promising to return if they ever needed their help again. As they disappeared into the glowing portal, everyone at Odyssey knew they had been a part of something truly special.
I mean, like, I'd watch it.
Yeah, exactly. Like, if they ever talked, Phil Fisher doesn't own it anymore, if they ever talked the team into this, I would watch whatever they make, because it would have to be the most off-the-wall crazy thing possible.
Yeah, I mean... I think if you ever got a crossover with those two, it would very much have to be like some weird Room of Consequence thing, right? I also feel like it did that simply because if it was truly written by AI, which I'm dubious whether... I feel like you could have typed in, well, make a VeggieTales Adventures in Odyssey crossover, but probably what happened was it would just like calculated like what happens in a lot of crossover specials. Then it's like, what's the other big Christian property?
Exactly, because I also, and we're not going to read this one, I had it write an Adventures in Odyssey Doctor Who crossover, and in half of them, Wit was the Doctor, which is not surprising. In one of them, Blackbeard was the Master, which I actually thought was a solid, unique take on the format.
Are you using ChatGPT for this?
Yes.
Okay.
But most of them were just, the Doctor shows up in Odyssey and takes Connie and Eugene on a magical adventure.
That sounds about right for AI.
So
Okay, I mean, pretty good, but yeah, never gonna. Maybe we should try to get a realistic one sometime.
I know. Well, whenever I type in "Write an Adventures in Odyssey" episode, it does a crazy one.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about the episode.
Yeah. So for next month, anyway. Yes. All right. So to the episode, Mile 151. Finally. Zoe is inspired to adopt a stretch of highway, but her crew's attempts to brighten things up go a bit too far.
So I'm kind of so they just made a big lamp or lights. Like I'm a little confused what the thing was.
Yeah, okay, so I kind of agree with you on this. Uh, when we started the Ted Humphries interview, I actually thought we were in Zoe's imagination.
Yeah, I was too. Like it's like really popular somehow.
So it just kind of sounds like they decorated the highway in such a way that people wanted to come and see it in the town.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, let's actually start at the top of the episode because, I find it very interesting that we want to try to encourage kids to adopt highways because that's significantly expensive.
Yeah, I was gonna say this whole episode's concept is a little like I'm it's not a bad episode, but it's inherently like who connected all these pieces into an episode?
Yes, so I think it would have been better if, like, the church had adopted a highway or Wit had adopted the highway and they were trying to get volunteers.
Yeah, this is I was gonna talk about this. It goes to like the wit. Like I feel like in most cases wit would have been like I don't know if kids like running a highway would have been like the best. Like he would have been like, "Well, are you guys sure?" Like he had like no hesitation. He's like, "I'll do it if you are in charge."
I mean, it's just kids' radio all over again.
Yeah, right? But like even like I feel like wit was a little hesitant about kids radio.
That's true. So, I mean, the episode kind of ends with it being Wit wanted them to learn a lesson.
In
I
which
will.
one? This one?
Yes.
Does he? I feel like he's just like, yeah, it sounds like a good idea.
Okay, maybe you're right. I just kind of assumed Wit was putting a lesson in there somewhere, although he
Well,
maybe let the ball
that's the
roll.
problem. I feel like Whit needs to be like, well, like I feel like I need a little hesitancy. I think he did teach a lesson by the end, but I'm always right. It's like a little weird. Like, did Whit like pull all this to teach a lesson? Because it's hard when there's no indication or no hesitancy at the beginning.
Right. Yeah,
I don't think
so
that's like a makes it a bad episode or anything. I'm just like curious if that's in Wit's full character. But Wit's character, I mean, it's a little malleable
that
nowadays.
this is true. Uh Right. So I on our Instagram posted my quick review of this. I think the first act is really, really good.
Yeah, and I disagree. I don't think. Well, okay. Here's the thing: there is a lot of J jokes.
Yes.
I know you had an issue where you felt like you couldn't handle J anymore.
No, it's not that I can't handle Jay anymore. I just feel like this episode might have been where I reached my upper limit with how much I can tolerate of him in an episode.
Well, I feel like what happened was, or I don't know. I can't say what happened. Him and Buddy are in there for comic relief.
Yes.
Like, I think they realized they wrote, or like the main idea of this episode's a little heavy
Right.
in some regards. Like, I think what they had was the hook with the returning character and the main idea maybe with that, and they needed like some way to like make it funny. So I mean I think their jokes are funny. There are a lot of jokes, and those two are really not that relevant to the plot, except that Buddy's like, here's an idea.
You're completely right, John. Part of the reason is probably those two don't have a lot to do in the story. But I did appreciate, for at least the first half of it, that this is not an episode where Zoe is uptight about something and has to learn to loosen up. She kind of gets caught up in the whirlwind of it. That's just very different for her character, so I appreciate that. I just feel like there were ways it could have been done better.
No, I mean, here's the thing. I mean, okay, so like we'll say like Mrs. Randolph comes back.
Yes, which was great.
Yes. I like it. Like I like, oh, what a fun returning character. I don't know. The plot is all over. Like it's fun when it goes on, but the plot is all over the place because first they're like, oh, there's some big storm in Odyssey. Am I forgetting that happened?
No, I think they're just saying a storm happened.
Okay. Yeah, some big storm that's bringing everyone down.
I mean, honestly, they could have done like they did last year with the snowstorm and did 4 episodes about people cleaning up after the storm.
Right, I think they were trying to probably to like explain that like here's like something you can do. So that you have the whole thing where first like the Barney Fife joke.
Yeah, that was a little weird. Like, I cannot imagine the Odyssey Town Council approving something like that.
Well, I think they said they wrote a marker.
Oh,
Some kid wrote a marker on the sign, but like
duh.
so weird, right?
Yeah, well, interestingly, and they mentioned this on the podcast that Hal Smith, the original voice of Whit, was a reoccurring character on Andy Griffith that is set in North Carolina and Whit's from North Carolina, and they confirmed that was a connection. So
Yeah.
I get the feeling they're just like sliding, Andy Griffith jokes into the show.
It's true, but then you get them going to Wit's End and being like, "Wit, could you help us sponsor?" And then they go to clean it up, and Mrs. Randolph just kind of randomly shows up, and that's a little weird.
I would okay. It is a little weird. I will give you that.
Well,
But like if Whit put out an advertisement, I fully believe Mrs. Randolph would have seen it.
it's true. But she apparently was going beforehand.
Oh, right, but we do get that reason later in the episode.
Right, but it's still like a weird, like, oh, why is like as a fan, you're like, why is Mrs. Randolph here? And then you go to this light fixture thing, and like there's some good humor, humor there, but then you have like the whole thing with the news reports and them calling out like the road state inspector to like look
Yeah.
at it, and then there's this whole like against it thing, and Mrs. Randolph signs it because she's kind of like upset about it, but it's like they needed some way for it to trigger. It feels like they were like trying to think like, oh, like we need some conflict in the middle, and it's like we need some way to like trigger them finding out she's not happy with it.
Right. Yeah. So I do. I fully agree with that. I also just looking at these discussion questions and artwork of the episode. I don't know how crazy they got with the highway because they make it sound like they built a little carnival on the side of the road, but
Yeah.
it looks like it was probably just some lights and some Elvis pictures.
Right, I'm just confused.
Right. Like I'm saying, it's something I would totally buy.
Stopping.
Yeah. It's something I would totally buy, like a little small town getting behind of, oh, look at what these kids did to our little stretch of highway. Let's celebrate that for a few days before it falls down.
Yeah, it's just like interesting, right? Because it's like kind of a goofy episode, but right, they play up this like, oh, some people don't like it with like so much anxiety about it.
Yes.
Like Zoe's like, what?
Right.
Like it feels like there's a lot of grief with it when Jay and Buddy are running around like joking, like this is great. And then it's like the Mrs. Randolph thing works. Like that's a real good emotional beat. But
Yes.
it's also just like, what? Like you can tone it down.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, at least she didn't say like, ever since my neighbor's house burned down. Like, they were neighbors, right? I'm not making that up.
Well, here's the thing. I get like things with voice actors. Just have Wooten instead of having this whole weird news controversy. I love Ted Humphries. I'm not upset that Ted Humphries is in the episode, but have Wooten come and be like, oh, where's the spot? And it could be that they cleaned up or like did something and say like, well, this is where Mrs. Randolph met her husband.
That would probably work a little better.
Because Wooten would know that. I'm
right,
sure
yeah,
Wooten went out with her probably during his mail route.
Yes.
Cleaned up the highway, and that would have been really solid. I don't think the episode's bad. It's just like a little of a convoluted path to get to the Mrs. Randolph reveal, which really works. Like the beginning really works and the end really works. And then you have just like, because the fact that people are like kind of against it is never really like talked about.
Right.
And like it's just there so they can see, oh, Mrs. Randolph isn't for it.
Yeah. Maybe if it was just Mrs. Randolph. Well, if it was just Mrs. Randolph, it would make it look a little petty. But
yeah.
Because I've been thinking of what they could have done. They could have made it like, oh, they're going to expand the highway a little bit, and people are against that because it's like a nice picnic here. That's at least a conflict. This kind of feels like if I lived in a town like this, everyone kind of knows within a week the kids will get tired of doing it, and that's how the episode kind of ends. The storm comes in and no one wants to put it back up.
Right, exactly.
So I do agree with you. Wooten in the episode would have helped. Also, I did not know this. Do you know who voices Mrs. Randolph?
Who?
Chris.
Yeah, I was gonna say it sounded like Chris.
Yeah, so, and apparently she's been doing it the whole time, so it actually surprises me Mrs. Randolph has not been around more.
It sounds more like Chris in this episode.
Yes, I'm double checking right now because I could have sworn it was always Chris, but anyway, to go back to Mrs. Randolph, I do like that they kept. Now, this was never like super upfront about her, that her character is clearly like an old lady version of Wooten. Where like she and Woon clearly get along so well because they're both kind of oddballs.
Oh, I mean, yeah, that's true.
And like it's sometimes hinted like, oh, she's a little quirky. This episode puts it a little more front and center, but it does line up with what we know of the character.
Yeah. I mean, overall, I say a good like very good beginning, very good ending. It's just I think there was a more direct route because I feel like this is a longer club episode, right? This is like 27 minutes.
Yes, it is on the longer side, which is maybe why they could have cut some of the J comedy.
Well, yeah, but I enjoyed the J comedy. I don't want it to stop, but
well, no,
it's hard, right? Because he is him. Also, like, am I forgetting what his community service was?
No, they just bring that up.
Right, it feels like there was like an episode we lost. I mean, maybe if he did get assigned community service in an episode, please let us know. But it does seem a little weird.
Now, one thing they could have done that might have been interesting, like I know with last year they did that. I know I mentioned this already. Last year they did that 4-part snow episode. Maybe like an interesting through line for some of the episodes this year could have been Jay doing his community service, so we can talk about different Christian outreaches.
Yeah, that would have been a real good through line, which is why and maybe that'll still happen. But that's why it was a little confusing. I'm like, was there a Storm episode I'm forgetting about? Was there a Jay getting assigned community service episode? And it's like, I feel like it's a little bit because I almost wonder if there was this would have been better as a Mrs. Randolph centric episode and adopting a road episode.
Yes.
Just because I think the Randolph thing you could do in a lot of different situations of like adopting or like putting a plaque on something and have the same effect.
Yeah, so I mean, look, I love having Mrs. Randolph back. Her being in the episode says to me they were like, we need somebody in this episode who's always around.
Yeah, I mean, it's and I don't think it's bad. It's just there are stuff where it's like, oh, was this a thing I should have known about? Necessarily like the stuff with like Jay and the Storm, those are kind of like created for this episode and you're like, oh, is that a continuity thing I'm forgetting? Or it's stuff like, oh, well, there's this petition because people are really against it, and it's like I feel like you could have done the petition thing and had an episode about like some people aren't gonna like the good things you do.
Yes.
Or like it could have been like, well, Jay, you're doing it for the wrong reasons. You're doing it to get publicity, not to do the right thing.
Right. Oh, yeah.
So.
Yeah, because I'm looking at these discussion questions. So I'm not going to read all of them because there's 9 of them, and I don't think we have that kind of time. The first one is, does the thought of cleaning up a mile of highway with your friends sound like fun to you? What are the best and worst parts of working on a team? Which is not what this episode is about at all.
I want to know how they got to the highway. Because it seemed like it was just the 3 kids out there by themselves. So I feel like it must be like right on the outskirts of Odyssey, right?
Yes. I mean, I'm guessing it's like maybe it connects it to Connellsville or something.
Yeah. I feel like that's hard without an adult there.
I tend to agree. Like that feels a little dangerous, but it's also Odyssey. It's a small town. The image makes it look like a 2-lane road.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a 2-lane road. Right. I think a lot of it works. It's just that middle part where, oh, what? That feels a little.
It's a good. It's a good beginning, a starting point and destination. It's just the journey I like question some of the choices, but still a good
Yeah.
episode.
I also find it, and I said this at the top, I find it interesting they make it look so easy to adopt a highway because the web quest is like, here's the mile of highway in Colorado, focus on the family donated. Then they cut to kids and families doing things not cleaning the highway, which I have to imagine is them slightly saying, do not bring your kids to a highway cleanup.
Yeah, a little bit.
So just a thought. All right, that wraps up this episode. Next month's club episode is apparently the Ark's the Thing, which features two kids who have never been on the show before.
We'll see how it goes.
So for all I know, they're the kids in the comic, the free comic this month.
It could be. I mean, that'd be interesting to have a book and an episode. Like, that tells, I mean, that would be a lot of tie-in, but I guess if you have club, it makes it easier to tie stuff in like that.
Yeah, well, I also think these are, like, the first time they've written Imagination Station books in a while, so...
Fair.
So we will see, because as I recall, and we need to read through these, I guess the original Imagination Station books had a through line. That wraps it up. We'll see you soon. I'm Will.
I'm John.
We'll see you next time.